Welcome to the series that takes you to the heart of America and reveals the inner workings of our country as you have never seen them before.
I'm Yul Kwon. I've worked in many different fields, from law to government to business. I've even won the reality show Survivor. But in every part of my life, I've been fascinated by the same things: systems and networks.
We're going to go on quite a journey, coast to coast, across this sprawling land to discover the habits, the rhythms, and the secrets that you only notice when you step back and see the big picture.
The interchange is oddly elegant. In the next hour, aerial photography and satellite tracking will reveal how America's transportation systems make us the most mobile people on Earth. We've built vast networks of roads, rails, and airways. And an army of workers keeps the wheels turning.
Hey, who here likes Mike the bus driver? Woo!
But it's getting harder and harder to keep all these systems running.
Well, I think the freeways will get so slow where a lot of people have just decided it's not worth the grief.
Many of them are aging, designed at a time when America was far less crowded.
You have a disruption in one place and it ripples all the way across the country.
It does have a ripple effect.
But even as they struggle to keep up, every day our systems miraculously manage to get us where we need to go. This is a story of 310 million Americans on the move.
This is America Revealed.
America Revealed is made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you. Monday morning, just before dawn. But this isn't the night sky. This is America. This is us. Each of these points of light represents 7,500 people. They create brilliant constellations that span the continent, from the faint glow of small towns to the blaze of cities like Chicago and New York. To connect these dots, we've built 4 million miles of roads, 200,000 miles of rails, 5,000 airports, the largest transportation network in history. But keeping it all moving, that's America's challenge in the 21st century. And nowhere does that challenge loom larger than in New York City. It's the perfect example of a powerful but aging transportation network that moves millions even while straining under their weight. Take the island of Manhattan, 23 square miles, home to 1.6 million people. Every weekday morning, its population nearly doubles, swelling with an army of commuters. These people are essential to the life of the city, but getting all of them onto this tiny island in only a few hours is a daily adventure that teeters on the edge of chaos. And it's about to begin. It's 6:13 a.m. I'm coming in on the red-eye from LA to JFK International Airport, and I've got plenty of company. We plotted the paths of every plane landing at New York's 3 major airports in a 24-hour period. A flight comes and goes every 24 seconds. That's more than 3,500 flights a day. By 7 a.m., thousands of yellow cabs are picking up their first fares of the day at the airports and heading for Manhattan.
This taxi is one of 60,000 vehicles that will weave its way through New York's necklace of bridges and tunnels in the next hour.
Just below these bridges, more than 100,000 people are traveling to and from the island by boat. These are the traces of those vessels darting around New York's rivers and harbor, including one fleet which alone carries 65,000 commuters a day. The Staten Island Ferry. As thousands descend on the island by air, road, and water, even more arrive by rail. Long Island Railroad trains carry suburban commuters into Manhattan every 2 to 4 minutes, along with packed trains from New Jersey and Amtrak trains. They all converge at America's busiest commuter hub, New York's Penn Station. While only a few blocks away, trains from the north stream into another bustling train station, Grand Central Terminal. But getting people onto Manhattan is just half the battle. Now they have to deal with this. The streets run yellow with taxis, competing with thousands of trucks and cars. And bus routes crisscross the island, adding another layer to the traffic. I'm not surprised the word gridlock originated here. It's 8 a.m., and it looks like nobody's going anywhere. But beneath these streets, it's a different story. I'm talking about the subway. Every day, this system carries over 5 million passengers citywide. Without it, traffic would overwhelm Manhattan streets and the city couldn't function. But the subway has had an even bigger impact than that, starting in the early 1900s when the first track was laid.
If you build a transportation system in America, whole cities and towns will spring up around it. The subway system is a prime example. It determined how New York City took shape and dictates the patterns of its inhabitants' lives.
Look beneath this forest of Midtown Manhattan skyscrapers. Multiple subway lines converge here, funneling in hardworking commuters from the city's outer boroughs, like Queens. This is a snapshot of what Queens looked like in 1917, when subway construction was just getting started. And here is what it looks like today, a busy, vibrant borough. The subway made Queens possible. But how? 100 years ago, to combat overcrowding in lower Manhattan tenements, New York expanded its fledgling subway system into the sparsely populated outer boroughs. Critics call them the tracks to nowhere. But New Yorkers soon got on board, lured by the promise of open land just a short ride from their jobs. By the 1920s, these lines were carrying more passengers than they could handle. The city planned to add over 100 miles of new track, but first the Depression hit, then World War II.
Today, we're stuck with the same basic rails that were out of date in the 1930s, and the number of passengers keeps going up with every passing decade. It's a pattern we'll see all over the country, enormous but aging systems working harder and harder to keep up with the growth they help create.
It's 10 a.m., and the morning commute is winding down. The city has survived another rush hour, and millions have made it to their destinations. New York's public transit system may be old and crowded, but without it, this teeming metropolis would come to a screeching halt. The same is true across the country. Our public transportation systems are what keep the nation moving. There's one system that carries a whopping 26 million Americans every day, more than any other form of public transport. There it is. There it is again. The humble school bus.
What's up, guys? Good morning.
I've come to Kingman, Arizona, to meet a guy who keeps one of these yellow marvels moving. Here, rush hour is just beginning. For many students in this desert community, buses are the only way to get to school. Around the country, kids rely on a 500,000-member army of transportation experts, the nation's school bus drivers.
Hey, who here likes Mike the bus driver?
Sit down, guys. When these kids are on their bus, they're my kids, you know, and I don't take that lightly. You have to be the mother, the father, the mediator, the nurse, the cool uncle.
Mike, how many miles do you drive every day?
On average, I'll do about 165 miles a day.
And that's just you?
That's just me.
This is Mike's bus. It's just one of Kingman's 53 buses. We planted GPS devices on them and found that they drive 1.5 million miles every year to every corner of the school district, an area the size of Delaware. That's repeated nationwide in thousands of school districts, large and small.
There's no system quite like this anywhere in the world.
Here in the US, if you can't get there on foot, you can get a ride to your local school, even if it's not that local.
So you guys are really kind of like the lifeblood of the system, right? I mean, without you, these kids wouldn't even be able to get an education.
Oh, no, they wouldn't be able to get to school. No. We keep pumping the kids in so they can get educated. All right, people, have a good day. We'll see you this afternoon. Have a good day, guys.
Our school buses work amazingly well, which is good considering how much we rely on them. But there are other transportation networks out there that face big challenges, including the system that first connected the country from coast to coast and made modern America possible. The railroads. To create a nationwide web of tracks, the federal government launched one of the most ambitious and expensive infrastructure projects in human history. And for nearly 100 years, America's railways were the fastest and most popular way to travel. But not anymore. To get a glimpse of what keeps our trains going and what slows them down, I've come to the rail hub of the United States, Chicago. More trains passed through this city than any other. Because in the 1800s, Chicago's politicians lobbied to make sure all national rail lines end here.
All tickets, please. Thank you.
That created jobs, but also logistical nightmares. Today, there are 3 different systems here with different needs, all fighting for space on one set of tracks. Commuter trains making local pickups. Amtrak trains traveling longer distances with fewer stops. But those 2 passenger networks are dominated by the biggest and slowest network of all. Freight. Our economy depends on goods carried by rail from coast to coast. We have the world's most efficient and profitable freight system, moving nearly 10 times as much as Europe. It's so successful that freight companies own most of America's tracks. And many of our freight trains pass through one small section of Chicago's freight yards.
The 27 miles of track behind me will move about 1.75 million freight cars each year. But this phenomenal success has come at a price. The system isn't nearly as good at moving something else: people.
So what is it about the freight system that gets in our way?
533 East Yard, looking for the rehump.
This is Jack Streck. He's using a remote control to push that train up a man-made hill they call the double hump. Shipping companies built this hill so that men like Jack can process all the freight coming through this yard and reassemble cars according to destination. The network we depend on to ship our goods depends on Jack, his remote control, and a surprisingly simple process known as humping.
Humping is actually a slang word for classifying the cars.
Sorting.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a postal facility. But instead of sorting mail, you're sorting these 100-ton freight cars.
Exactly.
After Jack pushes the cars up the hill,
There it goes.
he separates them by hand, a century-old technique called pin pulling.
This board up here gives me a signal, shows me where to make the cut. Break it away. There it goes. You're fine.
And then, Jack lets gravity drag each car down the other side of the hump to its outbound track. These cars carry chemicals bound for Virginia, lumber on the way to Michigan, sugar for a cookie factory in St. Louis. And they all have to wait their turn in line at the double hump.
Everything that moves through America moves through these yards.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of times you can tell how the economy is running out here just by what's coming through the yard itself.
All across the country, people and freight have to share the same tracks. Seeing these mile-long, slow-moving freight trains heading out of Chicago to the long-distance rail network, I can understand why passenger travel suffers.
In 2010, the federal government pledged $8 billion towards a potential solution.
The construction of new and upgraded tracks for a speedier passenger rail system. But that's only 15% of the plan's $53 billion price tag. Even if all that funding comes through, most long-distance travelers will probably still choose a different way to get from here to there. One that's newer and much faster.
Flight 17 now arriving at Gate 9.
This is the scene at Houston's George Bush Intercontinental Airport. Air travel, more than any other mode of modern transportation, has bridged our continent and sped up our lives. And every year, more and more of us are taking to the skies. This is flight data for the 50,000 planes that will carry almost 2 million passengers today. It shows how our airways connect every corner of the country. From sleepy rural airstrips to major hubs like Chicago's O'Hare International Airport, where on this day, a plane is taking off or landing every 34 seconds. That's nearly 1 million flights each year.
This vast system has created a completely new way of life. The people flowing through these airports aren't just occasional passengers. They're a new breed of road warrior who often fly thousands of miles every week.
One of those very frequent flyers is international insurance salesman Dean Burry.
Good morning, sir. How are you today?
I'm doing fine.
Any bags need to check in, Philander?
No, I never check bags. Good morning, how are you?
Good. Welcome aboard.
Thank you. A typical trip, Miami to Tampa, Tampa to Houston, Houston to Vegas, Vegas to Houston, Houston to Dallas, Dallas to Tokyo, Tokyo to Hong Kong, Hong Kong to Macau. Thanks, boss. Macau to Shanghai, Shanghai to Tokyo, Tokyo to LA, LA to Dallas, Dallas to Tampa, and that was 11 days.
Dean spends a lot of time in the air, so he can maintain face-to-face contact with his clients around the world.
What are some of the inside secrets of the trade that people like you know that other people don't?
Oh, gosh, I mean, there's so many of them. It's on every subject, you know, how you pack is a key one, you know, how you go through the security line. It's all about logistics for the most part, are all the tricks.
And what do you do when something goes wrong?
You want to, you know, anticipate it. It's starting to snow. I've looked at weather.com or whatever. So you start making backup reservations. Sometimes I'll have 2 or 3 reservations at a time. You have to be offensive versus defensive. That's the secret of a real road warrior.
It's not just road warriors like Dean zigzagging through our skies. Air travel is so common today that our airways are filled with all kinds of travelers. Some of them more unusual than others. Here are 3 regular passenger flights. But one passenger on each flight is traveling in cargo, brought aboard in a special box called an air tray. Baggage compartments of commercial airlines are the most common way to ship dead bodies long distances. Every day, 50 are shipped from one state alone, Florida. It's a retirement mecca, but when those golden years come to an end, many deceased retirees are flown home for burial. These passengers, on the other hand, are very much alive. But they're under armed guard and they wear handcuffs as well as seatbelts. They're traveling courtesy of the Justice Department, which runs its own airline flying prisoners to distant court hearings or penitentiaries, and deporting some illegal aliens out of the country. With so many people flying for one reason or another, our skies are the busiest in the world. But they weren't always so crowded. I'm heading to McDonald Pass in Montana to visit a relic of our earliest days of flight. Transportation-wise, this place is definitely off the grid.
Oh, that was fun. I feel like I'm standing on top of the world.
Pretty much are. We're on top of the Continental Divide.
They call Montana Big Sky Country, and it does look pretty empty up here. But this 90-foot tower holds a clue to how we learn to navigate our crowded skies. Mike Rogan is with the Montana Department of Transportation Aeronautics Division.
So, I mean, what do these things basically do?
They give you a visual reference when you're flying at night.
So these literally are kind of like lighthouses in the sky.
Yes.
The story of this air beacon dates back to the birth of commercial air travel in the 1920s. Aviation companies were eager to fly cross-country, but they had no way to navigate the night portion of the 30-hour trip. So they invented one, paying farmers to light bonfires in their fields, creating a path of flames to guide pilots through the night. They soon replaced the bonfires with a network of 1,500 gas beacons.
220, you're coming in nicely. You're 25 feet, too low, pull her up a wee bit.
By the 1960s, modern radar was replacing the gas beacons, except in Montana, where the peaks of the Rockies block radar signals, leaving pilots to rely on the old beacons so they wouldn't crash into the mountains. To this day, Mike continues to tend the beacons and make sure they're in good working order.
That's a heck of a climb.
That's a long one, isn't it?
So this is what the pilots actually see.
This lamp is focused in the middle of this 24-inch mirror, and as it's turning around, you get a sharp flash as you're approaching the beacon. When you see the beacon, it looks like it's flashing. That's because it's turning around. You're only getting it for a second.
Even though every other state has long since abandoned the beacons, we still live with their legacy.
Many of the first radar towers were built along this network of gas beacons, which means that if you take a commercial flight today, and fly along one of the early skyways, your path will look like a zigzag that traces the lines that sprang up from bonfire to bonfire and then beacon to beacon.
From bonfire to beacon to radar, we've made progress. But as our skies got busier, we needed a way to handle the traffic. Enter the Federal Aviation Administration, or FAA, which maintains our complex flight management system today. Here's how it works. Each airport's control tower guides each plane to takeoff. Then a regional control center keeps tabs on it until it reaches 10,000 feet, where the flight enters one of the 21 en route centers across the country. And watching over the entire system are the people in this state-of-the-art bunker in Northern Virginia. People like Flight Manager Deborah Griffith.
Air Traffic Control System Command Center.
This place is immense.
Yes.
I feel like I'm in that movie War Games or something.
No.
What are all those lights up on that screen right there?
Those are flights. Those are the active flights in the system right now.
How many planes are we looking at?
During the peak portion of the day, we're 5,000 to 6,000 flights active.
It's Tuesday afternoon, just an ordinary day for Deborah, who's sort of a traffic cop of the skies.
Good morning, everybody. This is Deb Griffith with you for the 1215 Planning Telcon. We're going to start